With episode 5 of the Battle Arena series now officially in the history books, here today we are going to be presenting and discussing another hypothetical battle featuring Pinhead from the Hellraiser franchise, in having him go head-to-head against Pennywise the Clown, Stephen King's Deadlights from the It series, which in hindsight we are only going to be using Bill Skarsgård's version of Pennywise the Clown in going up against the original Pinhead, to where before we dive any further into this conversation, we are going to be using 2 different scenarios for this fight showcase, with that being number 1, pitting both Pinhead and Pennywise in a real-world situation where they're not located in any other dimension, they're not located in hell, they're in fact actually going head-to-head and fighting in the living world as we currently are, with of course the second scenario taking place either in a different dimension or in this case hell. And joining me here today to further tackle the concept of Pennywise the Clown versus Pinhead is my good friend and YouTuber Mark and I. Now Mark, me and you have spoken off camera about the hypothetical of what things would be like to see Pennywise versus Pinhead, and I actually believe that this fight really wouldn't be as one-sided as many people think, because I think if we're going to be placing these characters in a real-world situation, then I really don't see Pinhead possessing the abilities to use all of his attributes that he possesses in hell, because of course if we're going to be looking at hell as being a completely different dimension, then when it comes down to Pennywise versus Pinhead in the real world, I think this fight might slightly favor Pennywise, but there's something about Pinhead when going back to the Hellraiser franchise that basically makes him invincible to some extent, especially of course when looking at everything that of course Pinhead is capable of. So Mark, going off of the proxy and pitting these characters up in a one-on-one situation and having them fight in the real world, before we jump into a different dimension or we jump into a hell-like scenario, who do you think between the two would actually take it in a real-world fight, judging of course based off of their attributes and their skill sets? Because I want to say that I'm slightly favoring Pennywise here, but my gut's actually telling me that Pinhead would take it. So with everyone out there listening and watching, I want you guys to also let us know down in the comment section below. Remember, starting off with a real world scenario first, between Pinhead and Pennywise, who do you think takes it in a IRL situation and why?
After we had that last conversation between Freddy and Pinhead, I was thinking to myself, after there was some feedback from a third party who was like, no, Pinhead couldn't do anything outside of the real world, or outside in the real world, it's all in hell. That's not true, and I don't think that's accurate for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, when we were talking about this, you had mentioned that Freddy would have a lot of agility and skill, as we saw in Freddy vs. Jason, so he can fight against someone who's very strong like Jason was. But when we're comparing all these different horror icons, a lot of what depends on the outcome depends on the setting. Is it this dimension? Is this location? A lot of that comes into play, and I think that makes it harder because it's all about the home team playing at the home field. And I still think Pinhead, among all the horror icons that I can think of, is probably the most powerful, all things considered. Because Pinhead, while he can do a lot, and I do believe that he can use his powers outside of hell, if you compare him to someone like Freddy, he did have a history of fighting in a world war. Like, he was a captain in an army, I think, if I remember correctly. So the dude knows how to fight. He knows how to use guns and survive and all that stuff without his powers. And I think if you compare him to Freddy, you have to keep that in mind. Now, with Pinhead's abilities, and again, this is just the feedback based on what we got with the Freddy conversation, was that he can only use his powers in hell, and that's not true, because he can summon those chain hook things from pretty much anywhere. And so he can pull them out from that dimension. Now keep in mind too that he's like an interdimensional being, where he can go to and from hell and to Earth. Pennywise, on the other hand, came to Earth by accident. Pennywise is the Deadlights. It's a female entity that came from Stephen King's world where the Dark Tower is at. And while I haven't read all of that stuff, from my general, very basic understanding, is that when there is an opening in dimensions, universe actually, it came from a different universe. It was like a multiversal thing. It fell into our universe by mistake. Now, it defies a lot of the laws. Pennywise defies a lot of our laws of physics and, well, pretty much everything, because it has a supernatural ability to it, and we don't have that in the real life. But I don't think that Pennywise has the trump card here, because there's not really anything that you can do, much like Freddy. They're very similar in this way, to instill fear in Pinhead. Yeah, you could use that box to like trap him and all that stuff like that, but I just don't know if that's going to be enough. I think he's far too powerful and far too strong. Like, he's not afraid of like the idea of the box as much as Freddy is afraid of fire, for example. And I think if Pinhead got into an encounter with Pennywise and Pennywise was trying to manipulate Pinhead with that, he would see right through it and be like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm a being from hell. I'm a demon. Like, I'm from a completely different dimension, which is different than being from a different alternate universe. Those are two different things. Hell is not a universe, it's a dimension, and Pennywise is from a different universe. Now, with that said, I don't think Pennywise would be able to do anything to Pinhead. I think it would be completely null and void. I think his powers would have absolutely no effect. He would just be able to warp reality around him, like, visually. But Pinhead would be like, dude, I'm from hell. This stuff doesn't scare me. This doesn't do anything to me. Like, I'm not worried about any of that. In addition to his, like, superhuman abilities and his ability to, like, travel in between dimensions like that, he could just pull in Pennywise into hell if he wanted to. Keep in mind that if hell exists, that is to suggest that when Pennywise dies or the Deadlights dies, it goes into the afterlife where Pinhead is from, which is a whole other level of power and manipulation that he can do in that universe. So if he wanted to, he could just pull Pennywise in, boom, done, it's over. Same thing with Freddy. Like, both of them don't really stand a chance against Pinhead in that way. So I'm not convinced that any one of our villains can be stopped, because Pinhead is an immortal and the others aren't. I think Freddy is the only other one that I can think of that has a supernatural immortality to him, because he's basically like a ghost with demon powers. But even then, I don't think that he would outsmart Pinhead. Pinhead transcends that to like god level power, whereas Freddy is more of like sort of on the ground level as like a grunt demon who just got his powers from, you know, some other evil, terrible demon. I can't remember exactly like what that demon was, but and I think that's also something you got to think of when you go against Pennywise. Pennywise has a supernatural power over, say, like you and me, because we're human beings and we don't have that sort of advantage. Jason, depending on the depiction, I think his latest movie has him more human-esque. I wasn't really convinced that there was a superhuman element there. Maybe there was, but I don't think so. The one with Jared Padalecki. But in all the other ones that Jason is around, he's basically a deadite, right? He's basically a zombie. So he's brought together by black magic. But I mean, you could dismember him if you could get close enough and separate his limbs, and that's it. Michael Myers, he's not exactly like, it depends. Like different stories depict these characters and why they keep coming back in different movies to have power like that. But all of them seem to have some sort of ties to hell, which motivates their or supports their strength and their whatever abilities that they do have. But Pennywise is not that. Pennywise is not from hell. Pennywise is just a female creature with like eggs that's trying to feed its young. Like, when you think about it from a very basic perspective, Pennywise is no different than any other living creature that's out there. It just has an ability to manipulate fear as its sort of trapping ability. Like, much like a spider has a web, Pennywise has that sort of thing. The clown entity that we know of is because we're terrified of clowns. Like, that's the concept. It's a creepy, nasty clown thing. It just uses that as sort of a camouflage or a sort of tool of manipulation to instill fear in its victims. But underneath all that, it's still just another creature like us, you know? So I don't think there's any circumstance in which Pinhead loses against Pennywise, whether it's in the real world or otherwise. If you argue the fact that he can't use his powers in the real world, which I don't think is true, because he can just open up a portal to hell and like zap some chains with hooks at it and slash you to pieces. So it's like, okay, maybe he doesn't have power in hell, but he can open up a portal to hell and then bring his power over, or he can just send you to hell and then he can finish the job there if he wants to. I think Pennywise's abilities are extremely limited, and I don't think they have any effect, because everything that it can do to a human, it can't do to Pennywise. It's all a moot point. It doesn't do or have any effect on him at all. Zero. I think Pennywise would have slightly more effect against Freddy, using things like fire or people with like torches that are coming to get him and burn him alive. That sort of thing I think would scare Freddy, like a sort of a mental manipulation, but I don't think he could physically hurt Freddy. But I think Pinhead wipes them all out easy.
But see, even then, I think, let's just say as an example, if Pinhead were to drag Pennywise to hell, I don't think Pennywise would have a fear of that. I think Pennywise would actually embrace all of the carnage going on around him, because it'll boil down to who really fears the other. And I think that if we're going to be looking at this from a real world perspective, then yeah, Pennywise is going to be looking to extract some sort of fear from Pinhead, and I don't think he's going to get that from him. However, if we're going to be taking this fight now in a different dimension or even in hell, remember, the Deadlights come from an entirely different, just the universe as a whole, the macrocosm, right? We don't even know what these things are, but at the same time, my question then becomes, if Pinhead were to look directly into the Deadlights, then would he be under their hypnosis? Would he be just completely taken over? Or would Pinhead just simply break through that? Because we've never really seen anyone kind of break through after staring directly into the Deadlights, if you're not going to include, third parties getting involved to kind of get the other character out the way. And I think that Pennywise in this scenario really doesn't have a reason to fear hell, really doesn't have a reason to fear anything, because if we're going to be adapting the concept of the Deadlights, or in this case Pennywise, kind of morphing itself into whatever it chooses to be, there's got to be something that Pinhead fears that Pennywise can kind of exploit to use that in his own advantage in getting the better of him. Now, in a hell-like scenario, or if we're going to be battling in a different dimension, I think that if we're going to be trapped in hell, then I definitely believe that Pennywise is going to have a very difficult time surviving down there, but by no means is he going to be scared. I think that it is going to boil down to the Deadlights itself, because what if the other Cenobites look at it, right? What if Pinhead decides to kind of explore and exploit whatever these Deadlights are to his own advantage, you know what I mean? So in a scenario where I guess they're in hell or in a different dimension, who do you think during that point in time would take it, and why?
My point is just that the Deadlights are a living thing that can be defeated in the real world by the opposite of what it stands for, right? Like, so it tortures these children, it tortures people, and makes them go insane and can kill them with their fears and all that stuff. But if the children can defeat Pennywise, I think Pinhead could do that too, by manipulating a situation that might. So, okay, let's put it this way. If Pinhead can manipulate people, deceive people, and he can create Cenobites and all those different things, I would have to be inclined to believe that his powers would lean into manipulating the Deadlights as well, in whatever form it chooses. Because I don't think there's any power or ability Deadlight would have that would impact Pinhead in any way. I'm not sure if we've ever really seen, like, this is where it gets weird. Humans are told, or we're believed, or trained, or raised, or taught, or whatever, that the ultimate, highest, transcendent, positive good is heaven, right? That's our location. That's where we go when we die. That's our paradise and all that stuff, if you believe that sort of thing. The opposite end of that is hell. So whatever bowels or worst dark place you could possibly think of in all conceivability would have to be hell in that way. The other universes where these other creatures are from are opposite ours, but it's not a dimension like hell in the same way. You kind of get in the nitty gritty. Like, I'm of the belief that dimensions and universes and timelines are all different things, all various aspects of reality. And so it kind of depends on what the laws of that universe are. Like, I think dimension, it's like, okay, this is going to sound kind of dumb, but let me explain. I'm of the belief that a universe is kind of like an onion with an infinite amount of layers. Those layers are the dimensions, but it's all self-contained within that single universe. It's trying to understand and comprehend what hell is like, and trying to put that into terms, because it is the movie. You have to ask, is the story, is the movie, are these things our perception of hell? Like, you mentioned that Pinhead is basically like Satan in that concept, but is that true? Like, is Satan actually an entity that's just not involved in those stories, but is actually present in that version of hell? Or is it like the Doom video games, where it's like, this is a dimension and hell is based off of that dimension where they're at? You know what I mean? So it kind of just depends. And it kind of depends on what your understanding or your belief in what a god is supposed to be like, because there's so many mediums that we see these days that where a god can be killed. Like, is a god and a deity? It's kind of like Thor, for example, in the Marvel movies. He's a god, but he can still die, right? Or you look at Khonshu from Moon Knight. Like, he's a god, but he's actually a deity. He can't die, he can be trapped. So what parts of those pieces come together to actually, like, support either side? I think in the most basic terms, we have to look at it like Pennywise is a form that was taken because he appeared in Derry, Maine, the Deadlights did, and took on a form of a clown in order to manipulate a child that was enthralled by clowns. And then he was able to capture children. And I think the idea is that when the fair comes around, it maintains that form in order to trap children, because children like clowns, which I think is bullshit. Like, clowns are freaking scary. I can't imagine a kid that likes a clown. That's terrifying. But he used that to trap children and then eat them. We see Pennywise in many different forms throughout the movies. So we know that Pennywise doesn't just take on the form of a clown. He takes on the form of whatever, like, can get him what he wants, whether it's to scare his victims, whether it's to manipulate the victims. Maybe he decides to be in the form of Georgie, for example, and then he's, trying to make someone feel guilty. Maybe he's trying to be like a nasty monster that's gonna like bite your head off. Maybe he's a clown because he's trying to lure in a child, whatever. Those are all like tools in its toolbox, so to speak, in order to get food and eat and survive and then go hibernate for 30 years or whatever that whole thing was. You look at Pinhead, you have to remember he was a human at one point, and then he ended up getting his powers and abilities, and now he's like a major figurehead in hell, and he can reshape reality. Now, it's hard to say because we don't have that many Pinhead movies in comparison to some of the other horror icons that we have out there, so there's a lot of questions, I think, about the extent of his power that haven't been answered. And it's hard to say whether or not, if in hell, his powers are amplified, because I still believe Pinhead can go anywhere he wants in and out of hell using portals to bring in the slaughter. He can turn you into a demon as a Cenobite. He can manipulate you. He can take advantage of you. He can get you to do his bidding. He can do all these different things, plus his crazy devil hell powers or whatever that he has. And I think if there's more to the Deadlights in like the Dark Tower and some other stuff with Stephen King that expands on its power and its abilities, I'm not all that familiar. But the fact that he was able to be defeated by a bunch of children, or humans, in any case, if you just want to leave it at that, I would have to believe that Pinhead could stop him. Because the only thing you can do with Pinhead is you can trap him and send him back, into lockup. That's really all that you can do. You don't kill him, you don't stop him, you simply slow him down. You can kill Pennywise/Deadlight. You can't kill Pinhead.
See, to that I disagree. I think that Pinhead can die, but in this particular scenario, it's kind of interesting because I can definitely see Pinhead being the more serious opposition, the more, aggressive of the two, whereas Pennywise is trying to exploit and kind of figure out what Pinhead fears. So down in the comment section below, are you guys for Team Pennywise/the Deadlights, or are you guys for Team Pinhead? Let us know down below. Again, thank you all so much for watching, guys. Thank you all so much for your time. If, of course, you guys are also new to this channel, then I do encourage you all to go on ahead and smash that subscribe button and turn on all notifications to never miss a single video that's posted onto the channel. Tune back in for more and give this video a big fat thumbs up right now if you guys enjoyed, and we'll be seeing each and every single one of you down in the comment section below and in the next video. Take it easy, guys, and have a great day. Peace!